Hi there and welcome to my channel Reviews with Jules and a happy new year! Oh, aren't we glad for 2020 to be over? But before it finally is, I am going to be sharing with you my top TV shows of the past year. So let's get into it. First up is Too Hot to Handle. Now this was my favourite dating programme of 2020 because they went, okay, we're going to take the concept of Love Island, which is sexy singles on an island, but we're going to add a little bit of spice and say, by the way, you can't have sex. I just thought that was a really ingenious thing to do. I thought it added such drama to the mix. I loved how there was a diverse cast and that they actually brought loads of different people from loads of different places like Australia, USA, United Kingdom. It was like all over the place. I was like, that's what I loved. The Boys Season 2 is my next favourite programme of 2020 because I had watched The Boys Season 1 in lockdown and I thought, oh, I kind of liked it, but it took me a while to get into it. But then I was literally anticipating Season 2 to come out, and when it did, it was a delight. The characters were more well-rounded and fully formed, and the storyline got a little bit more complex, and there was like twists that were coming out the woodwork that I was like, I would never have guessed that in my life. I would never have predicted that, and therefore it's made it one of my top programmes. The most surprising programme of 2020 probably was Adult Material. I wasn't anticipating it, didn't know it was coming out, but oh boy, when it did, oh yes, I binged watched all of that in one night. It tackled the taboo subject of the sex and porn industry, and I just thought Hayley Squire's performance was amazing, and it was just such an engaging series that taught me quite a lot. One of my top programmes of 2020 is Miss America. It's a great feminist piece. It's a little gem that came out in lockdown. I love the performances throughout the whole series. It's just wonderful. It's about second wave feminists and, you know, it's very educational. It's set between the sort of 70s and 80s, which is a great period of time. The aesthetic is amazing. The jeopardy in it is just such a well-written piece. So definitely in my top for 2020. Ryan Murphy's Hollywood did get a couple of mixed reviews, but from my point of view, I definitely think it's one of the top programmes of 2020, just for its script alone. And obviously it's got Ryan Murphy's aesthetic to it. It's in sort of like the 50s of the Hollywood golden era, and the what ifs and turning it on its head and going, well, if we did have a lead black actress in a Hollywood movie back then, how much we would have actually progressed with the times. And I think even just that concept, along with the aesthetic, along with the script, and along with obviously amazing performances, I thought it made it one of the best programmes of 2020. The Crown is definitely up there for me of the best programmes of 2020 because I only tuned in this series in series 4 and I was absolutely in love with it. I thought Emma Corrin's performance as Diana was amazing. I particularly liked this era of telling about Diana and Margaret Thatcher in power as the Prime Minister. I thought the performances were amazing throughout the board. I thought the aesthetic was amazing. It was a really interesting storyline with a lot of jeopardy, and it was patriotic to the UK, so definitely one to watch. Another great British programme of 2020 was Noughts and Crosses. Now, if you haven't seen this, I definitely recommend that you do. It's just so amazing. It's based on a book by Mallory Blackman of the same name, and it's basically flipping it around to be like, well, if Africa colonised Europe, what would the world be? It's probably my favourite programme for aesthetic. It was a little bit grungy, but it was so colourful with the African colours, and it was just something that was just beyond the level. Definitely one of my favourite programmes that you need to watch for 2020. Netflix's series Never Have I Ever has been renewed for a second season, and I literally cannot wait. I thought this programme had a lot of heart. There was a lot of diversity in the cast. You know, it was particularly taking on a young Indian girl as the protagonist and sort of going, okay, well, we're going to sort of tell you and portray a sort of representation that might not be the stereotypical one that everyone thinks about. And she was dealing with the same issues that most teenagers deal with, you know, liking boys, not fitting in with friends, but there was the additional level of the culture, and that she was also trying to fit in with her culture and her religion and her mum and her family, and there was just so many different layers to it that I just thought was perfect for a coming of age series, and I'm just really excited to see what they do for a second series, because what I loved is that there was lots of highs and lots of lows. Next up is Race Across the World. I was literally hooked on this throughout lockdown. I watched season 1 straight after season 2. And I'm just so excited for a season 3, but I don't know when that's going to be because obviously they raced across the world and that's probably unlikely in the current pandemic situation. I love the fact that you see these couples race across the world, and like season 1 you see a guy and a dad, and sort of the son is like, oh, I don't want to do this, dad, oh, I don't want to do this, and then you're like, oh, and then by the end of it he's like, I love you, dad, I'm going to respect you now. And it's like he actually grew throughout the whole season, and there were similar characters to that in series 2 as well, which I absolutely loved. Obviously the competition element of it, there was a lot of jeopardy, there was a lot of like suspense and action and lots of things that went on. Obviously you're also exploring the world with them and through their eyes, and yeah, it's just an amazing feel-good programme, and I cannot wait for them to do a next series. We all needed a laugh in 2020, and oh boy, did Emily Atack bring the lulls. She was absolutely hilarious, really relatable. You know, she did a mixture of stand-up comedy and then marrying that with these sketches that either played out the situations that she was talking about or something very similar and funny. It was just a really great, funny show with a female-led comedian that I just thought was spot on. She wrote it as well, which just shows how intelligent she is, and I really cannot wait to see more of her. Big Mouth was my favourite adult animation of 2020. Obviously, I do like Rick and Morty, but I think that Big Mouth just had that slight edge this time. They were actually taking some more serious storylines and actually having a lot more depth and complexity to sort of everything that was happening on the surface, but then we still had that absurd humour that's, you know, still was there apparent from season 1. So even though they've progressed and made the storylines a little bit more cohesive, the actual essence of the programme, the absurdity, the funniness, that was all still there, which is why I thought it was such a great programme of 2020. You really need to watch this 4-parter limited series on Netflix called Unorthodox. It's where Etsy, who's played by Shira Harris, who is absolutely amazing, astonishing, probably my favourite performance of 2020 in there. She was just so good. And it's about Etsy, who is a Jewish woman who tries to escape her Hasidic roots and go to Berlin. And it's also a sort of coming of age story because she's sort of trying to find herself and find her feet. And then she starts loving music and then becomes a singer. And there's just so much complexity, and it's really hard hitting, and it's just emotional. I mean, I cried at the end. I just thought it was definitely up there as like my top 3 programmes of 2020. Next up is a programme that we will not be forgetting in a rush, and it is Tiger King. Do you remember that? Of course you do. I mean, 2020 as a meme is basically Carol Baskin and Joe Exotic. That's end of. It brought everyone a lot of sort of joy and confusion and anger in lockdown. I thought it was such an amazing, well-told series as a documentary series. Everyone was watching it globally. It created such a worldwide talkability. I mean, it's really hard to put into words just how much this created such an impact and how well the story was told with sort of interview footage and past footage and, you know, interviewing, you know, the people who worked at the zoo and, you know, all the different stories, and sort of all the characters had an input into everything. And as the series went on, it progressed even further and you were learning more stuff. And when you thought, oh, well, we've learned about the zoo and Joe Exotic, then came along Carol Baskin, then you're like, I know all about Carol Baskin. And then it's like, by the way, she killed her husband, and it's like, what? And then along came Jeff, and then it was just, it kept going and going, and it's literally a story that you're like, you could not write this. My top programme of 2020 is flawless. It is I May Destroy You. And to be honest, such a massive part of that is because of Michaela Cole. I mean, she turned down a billion, whatever it was, deal with Netflix because she knew her own worth, because they weren't going to give her the creative rights. So she went off and thought, I'm going to still make it anyway. And she did, and it was so hugely popular. And obviously she created it, she wrote it, she starred in it, as well as then co-directed some of the later episodes. And I'm just like, how genius can you get? Like, it's literally insane, and I'm kind of slightly jealous. There's so many levels that it hits, and so many issues that it attacks with heart and humour, and it's just a faultless programme. Like, it's just the best of 2020. To find out more information about all the TV shows that I've spoken about, you can head on over to my Instagram, which will tell you everything that you need to know, the list and the programme, the full review, where you can watch it and how long the series is for. So for all that information, make sure you head to my Instagram. Links are in the description below, and I will see you next time. See ya!